All right, go ahead.
Okay, welcome. Thank you so much for meeting Amanda and I. We are with the GardenWorks Project, and this obviously is not the most ideal setting for us to be gathering, but I appreciate your participation in our garden talk today. So I'll start by introducing myself, and then I'll give Amanda a chance to also give her introduction, but I'm Jeannie Eisman. I'm the executive director at the GardenWorks Project. We're an organization based out of West Chicago, but we are focused all throughout Western Chicagoland. A little bit about myself. I live within the area, and I was born and raised in Chicago. I love gardening. I do not have, a horticulture degree, but food gardening is always something that has always been just a real passion of mine. So joining on this team with the GardenWorks Project to try to teach other people how to, just really have a passion and a desire to grow something from start to finish and for the purposes of building food security has always been, just a real desire of mine. So it was just a great fit. So here's Amanda, and I'll let Amanda introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Amanda Bryant. I'm the programs manager for the GardenWorks Project. I coordinate our home gardening program, our community gardening program, and then our food growers network. So I was raised in Lombard and then spent about 10 years in the city and was desperate to get my hands back in my own garden. So I've been back in Lombard for about 5 years and have been food growing ever since. So GardenWorks is definitely an opportunity.
Okay.
I believe we lost your microphone, Amanda.
Yeah. Can you try talking one more time, Amanda? Oh, there you are.
From the beginning. Okay. All together? From the get-go? Yeah.
No, it was just like the last sentence.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So, well, we'll proceed. I mean, I think there may be some technical difficulties throughout. I'm looking at the window and there's still some cloud coverage. It's still not the best. This is not the best weather. So I don't know if maybe that's making an impact. But let's just proceed. And yeah, so I would love to tell you a little bit about the GardenWorks Project just to start. So our mission is stated at the top. We promote suburban organic agriculture, which is quite a phrase. And it's just the idea of being able to encourage the local food system and to be intentional about it within the context of living within DuPage County or within Western Chicagoland. Food security is a huge topic. I think it's one that's really relevant to now, just given COVID-19. And we really just want to empower and educate all food growers in their desire to nourish not only themselves, but their neighbors in need. So our foundational program is our home gardening program. We started that in 2012. It was our founder's volunteer project that she did with her family. And that first year, she reached out to a local food pantry and built four gardens for families that were recipients of emergency food assistance. In this last year, we've built 109 gardens as of this spring, which was a daunting task because we are a volunteer-driven model. So in the context of not 2020, we would be recruiting in the late winter to find families or find households that are interested in growing for themselves, and they need to demonstrate some sort of need for fresh produce and may be reliant on some sort of emergency food assistance. we also partner with volunteers within the region because we want to encourage that neighbors helping neighbors model. We want these gardens to not only be utilized by families that are within the region, but we want the gardens to also be built and installed by families that have a desire to learn about gardening and a desire to learn about organic agriculture. So since 2012, we've built 524 gardens within the Western Chicagoland region. And not including that, we had 19 community gardens established since 2017. And let's see, how do okay, there we go. So you're probably familiar with more traditional vegetable gardens or traditional agriculture. So more traditional agriculture includes, the linear lines, economies of scale, maybe a little bit of crop rotation. This is not necessarily what we are talking about and what we are trying to promote for our families. We are trying to get our families to utilize a smaller amount of space, really maximize the quantity of space with while maintaining quality. And so we really encourage our families, you really just need hand tools. We do not need large pieces of equipment. We want it to be a very minimal investment of resources coming from our families. More modern gardens you probably see within home gardens is a picture of like a potager garden, vegetables and herbs and flowers growing together. And obviously this is a very well-maintained garden, so we don't see any weeds here. We try to bring our gardens to our families' homes, not only for their sense of privacy, to be able to maintain that dignity, but also to try to create a model that's going to be welcoming to the entire household and is going to be productive in that not only are people going to spend time outside, as a recreational activity gardening, but they're also going to really utilize the harvest because it's going to be close to home, easy to reach, easy to have access to. We maintain a square foot gardening model. We start all of our families with organic soil and organic compost. And as long as our families stay involved with us at a maximum of 3 years, these gardens are all raised bed soil. So they're very soft. There's not a lot of there are weeds that will come up, from the birds and from the wind. But we start with really high quality heat treated soil. So there should not ever be any kind of tilling. And so we obviously see a lot of community gardens that will incorporate in-ground, but when we're talking mostly today, we're talking in the context of a square foot gardening model and utilizing more compact spaces. Okay, so within each square foot gardening model, we have, and you know what, I think I skipped one, didn't I? So yeah, within the modern gardens, we're utilizing a lot of compost. This is actually a garden that is at COD. They worked with us to be able to receive a community garden in 2017. These gardens are not actually the garden beds that we utilize, but they are utilizing square foot gardening as a model, and they are using all organic practices here. So the square foot gardening model, it's based off of a man, Mel Bartholomew, who created a book called Square Foot Gardening. And the idea is that every 12 by 12 square represents a plant or a particular kind of variety. And the advantages is that, if you keep a garden at home, they're easy to map. There's less room for weeds. There's ease of use for succession planting. So if you plant throughout the year and one has really lost its productivity, you pull up and you have a whole new square. So, for our families, we have 32 squares from a 4x8 garden bed. And each square may have more than one plant or one seedling inside of it. So a tomato obviously is going to have one plant. It's very large, but with a cage, with some trellising, some maintenance, it can maintain a 12 by 12 square. We just try to grow it vertically. There are a lot of people who are hesitant to start square foot gardening because the idea of the tomato plant growing up or not having that much space is, or being able to grow vertically might be a challenge, but that's really far from it. We see a lot of successful gardens that are very tall by this time. And then, you know, we may have other items within our gardens. Bush beans, for example, would be another another plant that we put in for 1 square foot. We actually put 9 plants, which sounds outrageous, but I do square foot gardening at home. I was a naysayer when I first started, and it really does work. Square foot gardening, the model is also based on a bit of that companion planting and understanding of soil science. So knowing that a tomato is really going to deplete the soil pretty quickly, putting 2 plants in 1 square is not only going to be really confining in space, but it's also going to be a nutrient suck. And so they won't be as productive as having 1. Whereas bush beans, obviously it's a little different. So this is an example of one. Some people grid it out, and then here's the book by Mel Bartholomew. And then finally, you know, this is the model that we use for our families. So we want to create a productive and prolific garden for our families. So we plant these in the late weeks of May after the last frost date, and we try to complete them by June 1st. So everything is here are either seeds or very small seedlings. The concept of the GardenWorks Project's home gardens, given that they are for families that may not have access to fresh produce or may be reliant on food pantry assistance, we want them to eat from the garden within 2 weeks. And so many of these herbs, the lettuces, they're going to be able to utilize. And then these open spots at the far end are, you know, our choice items. Another concept within food security is just that there are families that, you know, may have a particular palette in mind of what they would like to grow. And a family can be truly food insecure if they don't have a palatable appetite for a particular item. So, or, you know, something that is culturally irrelevant for their kitchen. So giving them options, you know, we always provide roselle, which is a sour leaf, to our Burmese families. We also usually carry lemongrass during the year and provide that for them as well. So I'm going to hand it over to Amanda and let her speak. If for some reason you don't hear her, Paul, you can maybe chime in. And if for some reason either of us get disconnected, one of us will try to take over at that point. So.
Okay, so why plant a fall garden? I feel like at this point in the growing season in August, people start getting the summer garden fatigue where they're overwhelmed with harvest and their plants have gone wild, and the thought of adding any more plants is so daunting that you can get a little bit, you can lose interest. So I would say that once you get in there and you clear out some of these plants that I'm going to mention that have kind of run their course and are done producing for the season, you get a lot more, you can appreciate the space available, and it is kind of like a reset, refresh button. So I encourage you to fight against that late summer gardening fatigue. So why do we plant a fall garden? So putting plants in the ground in August can extend your growing season till the end of October, even beginning of November, really. A lot of crops do much better in a cooler temperature. You'll notice that with this crazy heat in the summer, that lettuce bolted super fast. It does not like super hot weather. And a lot of crops taste better with a cold snap. Kale, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, things like that. When the plant is cold and it has to insulate itself, it sends out signals to add sugar. And that sugar can add some really nice flavor and sweetness in the cold snaps that we have. Colder weather also inhibits weeds. So there's less weeding, there's less maintenance and upkeep with the fall garden. And then many crops that you plant by seed in the fall have a shorter maturity date, so you can get plants faster than you would in the summer. So that's really why to consider a fall garden. So next slide is how do you know what to plant? You need to figure out the first frost dates for your area so that you can consult with the different seeds and seedlings, different varieties that I'll mention, and figure out the best time to plant based on the frost date. Another thing you'd want to do is look at your garden and consider how much sunlight do your gardens get when colder temperature comes and the sun sets a little bit earlier. Winter sun is really strong from the south, so that's something to consider as well. It's a more intense heat, so you should take advantage of gardens that face south. Beyond that, I would find out if where you get your seedlings and seeds. If that is it a pop-up stand that's opened up in just the spring, or do you have access to seeds and seeds?
We lost your volume, Amanda.
Yeah, Amanda, can you hear us? So it looks like she just froze. Okay.
It's okay.
We lost you for about maybe 15 seconds.
Okay. So I was saying you should touch base with your neighbors that are gardeners and see what they've had success growing in the fall if you're new to it, or reach out to a local garden club. We at the GardenWorks, we have the Food Growers Network, which is a great resource for local food growers. We also have a YouTube channel that has, we've started posting a lot of videos that will be coming out with some more fall specific things. So check in with local gardeners in your area and see what has been working for them. Because what you're going to take advantage of when growing in the fall is what stage are you going to be eating your food. You're not going to have time to get a fruit or a seeding plant like a tomato. It's not going to be able to get to that point. So you're going to be eating food that's in its vegetative stage, like kales and chards and things like that, or pre-flowering like broccoli and cauliflower. So you need to time that out, because you're never going to get to the flowering stage like a zucchini, for example. So it has a shorter growing stage. You need to keep that in mind. So next slide. So great crops to grow in the fall. So I've separated these out by seed and by seedling. By seed, salad mix is fantastic to grow, and it will keep you going for months, particularly if you scatter seed often, every couple of weeks. You'll have a consistent harvest of lettuce. So me personally, I have a section that I start in the spring that is, a section that I just broadcast seed. I literally sprinkle salad mix seed, not head, salad mix. So it's the baby leaves and greens that you want. You sprinkle it, water it, keep it consistently water, and you'll end up with a carpet of greens. They're not heads of lettuce, they're greens. It's literally a carpet of lettuce that you will then harvest every couple of weeks. Grab the leaves and a sharp knife and you slice it just above the soil line. And then within a week, if you've been consistently broadcasting seeds, that green will continue to come up, and they love a little bit of cold. So that's a great seed to get. It's also a great one to keep an eye out for at the end of season sales at wherever you buy your seeds. And a lot of grocery stores sell seed packets, and most people don't do fall seedlings, so they discount their seeds and they try to get rid of their seeds at the end of the season, usually in August. So that's a great time to pick up multiple packs of salad mix, like a dozen, especially if you're broadcasting a big area. Every couple weeks that adds up, and if you can get them cheaper, that's a great time to do it. Some other great things that we grow by seed direct sowing into the soil are green beans, peas, arugula, radish, turnip, rutabaga, I mentioned here, carrots, and beets. And then by seedling, the actual small seedlings that you can get at your garden center are heads of lettuce. That's romaine, that's radicchio, and then bok choy and cabbage do really well with cool weather. And then of course broccoli and cauliflower, cilantro and dill, two things that bolt really quickly with high heat. So they love a little bit of cold. And then, you know, winter's favorite kale, collards, and chard, which hold up really well to a hard frost, as well as fennel. Some of these you will want to check the seed packets. Green beans, more tender greens like chard don't do well with a super hard frost, unlike kale and collards can handle a pretty cold, pretty hard frost. But others just they don't do well with a really hard frost. So again, things to keep in mind. So those are the things to grow. And then we move on to succession planting. So we're getting into the things that you want to take out that have run their course and the things that you want to put in their place. So succession planting is really taking advantage of, you know, prepping, always thinking one step ahead. So the peas and the beans that you planted in the spring have run their course by mid August. They've grown as much as they can. They've really gotten really tough and fibrous, and now's the time to pull them out. Also with kale, if you've been harvesting through the season, you've probably got a long stem and all the leaves on the bottom are out. The old kale plants, those can come out. You can put new ones in the middle of August. Old bolted lettuce, that stuff can all come out. So that's what you're going to be taking out. And then we'll prep the area. I'll mention that going forward, and then put in these cold crop seeds and seedlings that I mentioned before. So the next slide.
We did have a couple of questions come through. Did you want to answer those before we go?
What's that?
We did have a couple of questions, or did you want to hold those to the end?
I can take them now, if you'd
Okay.
like.
All right, cool. First one was from Rita. What do you mean by consistently broadcasting seeds? Should we continue to plant seeds as the seedlings come up, or do we do it weekly?
Okay, so what I mean by broadcasting, as opposed to sticking seeds in the ground, you know, spaced out, mixed green seeds are super small, and they're not going to grow heads. We're just looking for the baby leaves. So you can literally scatter by broadcasting. I mean, just kind of shake them over an empty space of land dedicated just to.
So she went mute right now. I will point out while we wait for Amanda's computer to come back on, this is Jeannie, that there's a great YouTube video that Amanda did on lettuce planting, and we'll have to share that YouTube video, but you can look up the GardenWorks Project on YouTube, and she does a great job of showing her literally harvesting and then broadcasting in that same spot. So it is something that some people will actually find a set of 4 squares and will rotate week by week by week, adding more. You know, once you harvest from week 4, then you're adding in new seeds, and then you get, you know, week 3 will transition to week 4. You can plant there, and then you go back and forth that way.
Right. So when you harvest that lettuce, you grab it and you're taking a really sharp knife. You don't want to pull it because you want to keep all those great microorganisms and roots.
And she's out again. So she does want to, yeah. So in the video, it's actually pretty bizarre how you can, instead of pulling out, sort of working the soil back to a starting position, you can reseed right on top of where you cut. Those roots and sort of starting stems will die off and become almost like in a way a weed barrier and almost a compost, and will start up again in that spot.
Exactly. And then between those harvesting, I'll sprinkle in some compost tea or something like that, just to give it a little boost, because the soil's been working hard the last every 2 weeks to produce that. So
Yeah. Do you want to take? Can we hear the other question, Paul?
Absolutely. Where do you get seedlings for fall in the West Chicago area?
Good question. We actually have a fall seedling sale going on, and we will have the website open for just 2 more days. So you can purchase fall seedlings there. We have only about 7 varieties that we're going to be maintaining, or that we are going to be selling this year. But like the seedling list that she had put down in the previous slide, it's many of those. So we do have broccoli, kohlrabi, bok choy, cabbages, kales. Yeah.
mm-hmm.
Do I go to the next slide? Was there another question, or was that it?
That was it for right now.
Okay.
All right. So then this is a list of the things that would do well going in now, replacing the old things. As you'll notice, things have been replaced. Basil, for example, we're not going to plant that. We're going to let that die off. Basil is the opposite of a cold crop. It hates any kind of a cold snap. But these other things that we've added, they do well in cold, in a frost. So the new lettuce is going in, chard.
And I think she's saying tomatoes and peppers. Those are the ones that stay in. Usually by now, parsley will have tried to bolt potentially and may need to be refreshed.
Hear
And
me?
so parsley is one that's good to keep going with by planting another seedling.
Of what? What did you say, Jean?
I was just talking about parsley and how some herbs can benefit from just getting a fresh start all over again. So if you were to plant parsley again, they will last through the end of the year.
This is also a good time. You might not be planting new basil, but this is a great time to do a hard prune on basil. You can take down the top 3 to 4 sets of leaves. You always want to snip the stem right above a new set of baby leaves, but you can go down 3 to 4 sets and kind of kick it into gear again and see the last bits of the remaining energy left in the plant. So to accompany the fall harvest of tomatoes. So give your basil some love and a good hard pruning. So next slide. All right, so crop rotation. This is a really good example of like a long-term, high level plan for your garden. Is you don't want to plant the same thing in the same place twice. So whether you use a bunch of different beds or areas within the bed, legumes, peas, beans, edamame, lima beans, these things fix atmospheric nitrogen, which is fantastic for the soil. And it's great to pre-seed planting tomatoes, peppers, zucchinis, the things that suck the life and every bit of nutrients out of the soil. You want to plant those things after you've planted legumes. It's also good to rotate, a shallow rooted thing like a lettuce with a root, a deep rooted plant, turnips, carrots, beets, those kinds of things. So you'll see here there is a rotation to the crops that you plant. So yep, you can look more into that. But just keep in mind, you don't want to plant the same thing in the same spot twice, because not only are you depleting the nutrients, but whatever bugs you had there before are going to be primed and ready to go for the next same crop. So you want to mix it up and keep them on keep them on their toes, so to speak. So keep that in mind. Next. All right, so now we've got all of the old stuff out, the beans, old lettuce, that stuff. We're going to prep for these new things that we're planting. So you remove all the old plants.
Sounds like we lost her again.
Yeah.
So, um, so it does sound like we'll, at least for our families, we remove and compost the old plants. We weed the area, and then we start to incorporate new compost for in preparation for the new seedling and for the roots.
Right. There's also overwintering, where you can plan to plant crops to use in the spring. So overwintering are things that go dormant in the cold. Garlic is a great example of this. Garlic you plant in December and you reap the rewards in the spring. It does all the work under snow. Same thing with kale, is the same kind of way. It'll brighten back up along with spinach in the spring. So that can take a really hard winter. So yeah, so those will be the first things that come up in the spring. So that's overwintering. Yep. And then, okay, so putting your garden, once you've gotten everything out of your garden, after working really hard in the fall, you want to prep it so that it's good to go in the spring. So again, you want to remove the old plants and the old weeds, incorporate some more compost, and then here's where you have a really a fun choice. You can spread about 4 inches of chopped leaves. So this is going to protect the soil, cut down on erosion, compacting soil. So it's good, at the end, go around with the leaves, run over them with the lawnmower a couple times, and then you take those leaves, put them on your garden bed. Again, 3 to 4 inches, really thick, nice insulating layer, and that sits on there over all winter. You can sprinkle it with some water to keep it from blowing away. But you want the pieces about cornflake size. If they're any bigger, they tend to layer over each other and mat, and then you don't get any water running through. It just kind of seals it off. You do want some movement in there so that so little bugs and microbes and stuff can do their work and spread the soil around. So you can do that. That's a mulch for the winter, or you can apply a cover crop, which is really fun. I did it for the first time this last year, and it was really successful. I have a video on it on YouTube. So a cover crop is like a living mulch. It's a living layer that you broadcast, just like with those salad greens. In this area, the good cover crops to grow are peas and oat seeds, really. So once you've cleaned out your garden, taken the weeds out, you scatter these seeds, you water it down. You want to do it enough times so they do have a chance to germinate. You don't want to put the cover crop in the dead of winter. But what will happen is that the roots of that cover crop, the roots will hold the soil in. They'll give life to the soil, structure to the soil. So there's roots and there's places for water to seep in and mix within the soil. It fixes nitrogen, it incorporates organic matter, it traps good bacteria and little organisms to keep the soil thriving through the winter. And once the spring comes, it'll germinate and flower. It may die off during the hard winter, but in the spring, you can work it back into the soil, and then you've got a built-in organic matter to plump up your soil. So you can plant the cover crop in the late fall, let it flower, or let it germinate and then die off, and then turn it in the spring. Or you can apply a cover crop in the spring, which will give you enough time, which is what I did in my video. I gave mine about 2 months. So in March, I planted my cover crop. There's a video when I plant it and how I do it. And then there's a video the day I tilled it in, and it was about 3 feet tall. And I put it in, this is a cover crop. I have a bed or a bed that I plan to dedicate just to tomatoes. So it was a perfect way to prep the soil for the heavy feeding of tomatoes. So it's a great video. You should check that out. I might try this winter planting in the late fall and see how that goes. So yeah, it's a good, you know, trial and error. What works best in your area. You definitely want to turn the soil over and till that, not till, but break down the cover crop before it flowers and starts to reseed again. I didn't have any issues. Like I said, I turned it and it was about 3 feet tall. You can, if you want, if they're really tender and really new, you can eat some of the cover crops and some of the pea shoots. You would treat like microgreens if you'd like, but otherwise it's just used, it's grown to die off and feed your soil. You're not really harvesting it. So that's a cover crop, and that's a great way to protect your soil and prep it for the season, protect it for the season to come. So, yeah.
You have a few questions if you want to take some of those.
Sure.
All right, cool. First one, where do potatoes fit into the crop rotation?
Jeannie, do you want to take this one? I know you did some.
Yeah, so I do potatoes. So, you know, if you're going into a home garden, you know, when you think about, or I'm sorry, an in-ground garden, I think that it just needs to be in a space that you can utilize and then transition to a different spot. To my understanding, tubers are going to be a large nutrient dense product. And so it is very easy to, and it's also very prone to actual disease. When you think of the potato famine, that essentially is just a perfect example of what happens when the soil is not well maintained, if they have not been rotated, and also if you have not pulled everything from the soil. That actual rot with disease can actually create a real issue. And so we do have, I don't think it's on here anymore, but we do talk a lot about companion planting, and we do have some resources on our website for that. I can't say for sure what companion plants would work best. I think that they function a lot like a tomato, where they are very nutrient dense. They do require a lot of overall maintenance and rotation. And so things like parsley or basil, onions, even cabbages are things to grow near them. And then just make sure you rotate that, probably with a legume on the off years.
All right, I got one more question for you here. Does crop rotation apply for fall planting? Should we not plant beans in the fall where they were in the spring and summer? I think you just kind of answered that one too.
Yeah, well, and I will just say, you know, my go-to with any kind of issue that there might be with soil, or potentially just using a very small, dense piece of space, doing legumes over and over again is never going to be an issue. To my understanding, you can always put in beans, and that should be in some ways a real go-to if you don't have a knowledge base of what you should rotate in. And so right now is actually a great time to put in beans. I would say no later than the end of next week, but if you find a standard bush bean that has a maturity date about 60 days, you should be able to get a harvest if you were to put something in. If you're potentially using it as a cover crop, there are a lot of different kinds of beans that you can use. So it wouldn't necessarily be like the Blue Lake bush bean. That's not actually what we're talking about. But if you want a productive harvest, you know, that's what you would use. If you're not looking for that and you're actually speaking about a cover crop, they're usually like a type of fava or a type of pea. That's the kind of legume that they usually incorporate within cover crops.
Yeah, beans don't do well with like a really hard frost. They're a bit more tender than that, so keep that in mind. You want a shorter germination for them. Yeah, but you can never go wrong with beans. Your soil will thank you.
Any other questions, Paul?
Yeah, there is one more here. Do we plant overwinter garlic in the fall at the same time as our fall plants, or can we plant it after we finish our fall harvest in October?
Yeah, so you can plant them afterwards. So, for example, I have a garden bed that I just pulled up garlic from. And it was around the 4th of July that I pulled them up. We've already incorporated some compost in. Since it was in ground, I actually tilled it in with a broad fork. And we're going to put in cabbage there this weekend. So we're going to do the cabbage. The Napa cabbage that we use is actually a really quick growing kilo cabbage. And after that, I'm planning on putting in the garlic. You want the garlic to potentially sprout, and that's okay if it does, but too early is you're going to get garlic that really thinks that it's summer and it's going to grow, and it won't. It'll use all of its nutrients and won't store it inside that bulb. So usually an October date is a great time to be putting in garlic.
But remember that garlic looks the worst before it's ready to come out. People like, I mean, it's like all the energy goes from the stalks and the leaves to build that bulb, and people yank it thinking that it's dead and it's gone, when in actuality, it's just sucking all the energy from it, and the bulbs are doing the work. So resist the temptation to chuck it out. Yeah, so something to keep in mind. Any other questions?
That's it for right now.
Okay. Well, I'll take over and start talking about some of our upcoming events. So we primarily, as I mentioned before, work with home gardens and community gardens, but we also have a third program, which is our community growers, for our community growers within the region, and so it's called the Food Growers Network. And we want to just have food growing as an established process and habit for all of the region. We don't want it only for the families that we are supporting. And so one of the ways that we not only try to raise some revenue, but also try to incorporate some education, some knowledge for our families for our community is the Food Growers Network. The first event that we're doing that's coming up will be the fall seedling sale. We do one in the spring as well. Pickup is in West Chicago, and it's going to be COVID style, so masked, and it will be a drive-up pickup, and so we'll just open your trunk or your back door and we'll place them in there. We have 2 more days where the sale will be open, so look at our website at gardenworks.org/shop and you can find it there. If any of the participants know of our organization, we do a fall fundraiser every year called the Harvest Against Hunger. Unfortunately, given the situation today and this year, we're going to be doing a virtual event. We also have good relationships with local farms because we are trying to just encourage not only food growing in general, but also purchasing and supporting local as a way of building sustainability and more sustainable, better stewarding practices for our region. And so this fundraiser is actually going to shift a bit. We normally have more of a gala kind of event. It's very casual, but it's definitely, music and food. The fundraiser this year is going to be highlighting 3 local farms within the region: Nichols Farm, Stojan's Vegetables, and Mighty Greens Farm. We're going to be doing a video series that is open to the public to be able to see that. And we're going to be culminating the entire video series in late September on a Sunday afternoon. And we will be celebrating with a gift box. And this gift box will be sort of in CSA form. For each ticket purchased for this, you can receive a box, and the box will have different goodies that each of these farms are really proud to provide for us and to display, just as a way to be able to just show that local food and eating local is even a possibility with such a cold winter around here. So stay tuned for that. We would love to have your participation in that. And then we're always recruiting for committee members and volunteers. Like I mentioned before, we are a local driven model, a volunteer driven model. And the only reason we want to maintain that is because there is an education piece that I think is very important and crucial for our community to engage with the topic of food insecurity on a bigger level. And so it takes 1 hour to build one of these gardens. And on a normal year, where we're not social distancing, we recruit for upwards of 250 volunteers to gather on 2 weekends to build family gardens for our families facing food insecurity. So we give you that training, and you also get the opportunity to learn all about raised bed gardening in the end. We always have a lot of volunteers that really just get the bug, maybe have never even gardened before, and participate in this way. If you have no desire to garden, which is probably not the case if you're on this call, we still are always recruiting for community members. So if you have a leadership gift, if you have some vocational skills that you want to be able to give back, please contact me. It's just Jeannie@GardenWorksProject.org or info@GardenWorksProject.org. So other ways to get involved: engage and visit us in one of our educational events, which will likely all be virtual this year. We have an upcoming book club meeting that will be in October, and that book will be Farming While Black. It's a great topic to be discussing right now. And we also have ongoing fundraisers, like I mentioned before, but just ongoing need for one-time or monthly donations that you can find out more on our website. And so that is all. Do you have any other questions? I did see a couple up there.
Yeah, we got two that came in. First one is, when do you start seeds for fall crops such as fennel, kohlrabi, or cilantro?
So you mean direct sow directly into the soil? I think now would be a good time. I don't know if you're meaning growing from inside your home, but it's warm enough, unless you're afraid of, critters coming by and eating up the baby greens. I'm all for starting direct sow in the soil. Keep it simple. Jeannie, you do more seedling starting. Does that seem?
Yeah, I think the one caveat to just being in this region is sometimes you do get that cold snap early, and so our fall seedling sale actually has kohlrabi as a seedling form. They are great to start with seeds, but they do have a longer maturity date. So I would say kohlrabi and fennel are usually better as seedlings, unless you don't mind having just more small, tender fennel. But right now is a great time for things to grow, because the seeds do well with the heat right now. They will likely not bolt because they are not things that will be growing prolifically through the heat of the next month. It will likely be cooling off, and then that's when they're going to thrive.
Any more? If there's one more question.
Yeah, there was one more. The soil is so warm that my peas or bean seeds don't germinate or are rotting. Do you have this problem? And if so, do you have a solution?
Yeah, I will say that, at least from my experience, keeping things heavily watered, and if you have access for in-ground, you're going to have more success than if you are raised bed. Raised bed right now, the heat is a lot warmer because it just sort of permeates and is above, so it just sort of stays in that space. Whereas in-ground, you have, the somewhat cooler nights. And I'm surprised that I can see the peas having trouble, but I'm surprised the beans are having trouble right now. I wonder if it's a variety issue. Um, I just started some yellow wax beans the other week, and they did work. So I actually have not researched much about the yellow wax, but that might be one to try, given that they did start last week, although it wasn't terribly hot. But they are poking out now. So
We get another one that came in.
okay.
So if we want to buy plants beyond what you're offering in the seedling sale, such as cauliflower, where would you recommend purchasing? Do you have a preferred place?
I'm a big fan of Pioneer in Villa Park. They're so incredibly knowledgeable, and they don't mind endless questions. So I'm a big fan of theirs. So I would say Pioneer in Villa Park on Villa Avenue. Yeah, they're kind of my go-to.
I would say the growing place is also a great option. They do have a fall set of seedlings that they do, start for the purposes of having fall seedlings. Um, and if I remember correctly, Prosex also in Winfield. I'm sorry, Growing Place is there are two
Naperville.
locations, Naperville and Aurora, I think. So I know those are three locations. If you go to a place like Home Depot, I think they still have the spring seedlings that are just enormous at this point. So herbs, I don't think that they're getting necessarily a new shipment. So those would be questions you would want to ask. To get something that's already been established in potentially June, that's been sitting in a pot, is more likely to bolt at this point. Whereas if you have something really small, um, yeah, it'll have a little more, you have a little more time and cushion.
All right. Any more questions from our attendees? I don't see any left in the box. So just want to thank everyone for coming out. Thank you for Jeannie and Amanda for the presentation today. Again, we'll be sending out the PDF of the slides to everyone that registered, and you can check out this video on our YouTube channel probably tomorrow or Wednesday, whenever I can get it uploaded. So again, thank you so much, and I hope everyone has a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.